welcome to the masterclass portion of Victor Polastschek's Advanced Studies for the Clarinet. Today we'll be going through Etude number 8 after Scaramouche by one of the Lesis legends, the one, the only, Darius Milhaud. Now for everyone out there who's never performed Scaramouche for clarinet piano, never heard of it, the original work was actually composed for 2 pianos. Completed on July 1st, 1937 in Paris, Milhaud conceptualized his 3-movement suite after Scaramouche, a clown-like villainous stock character in Italian commedia dell'arte, an art form famous for subverting social expectation and authority. Its upbeat, carefree vibes made Scaramouche an instant hit and eventually found its way into the clarinet and saxophone repertoire's transcriptions many years later. Considering it's July 2020, I find it fitting that we're covering this particular etude, and I'm really excited to unpack it and work through it. Now getting into the music, this etude is pretty difficult. I want to say it's probably one of the most challenging ones in the book. I think it really runs the gamut of clarinet technique. You have difficult key centers, we're going to the break, there's a lot of sequences that are quite tricky. But all that being said, it's still music and we need to make it sound fun and exciting. So, given the tempo suggestion of the Vivace, I'd probably take it around 136 to 144. Just keep in mind that you want to have maybe a little bit of wiggle room to take some time and have a little bit of flexibility. It is an etude, so we don't need to stay strictly in time with the piano, but you still want to make sure that it's flowing in a way that gives you a sense of direction from beginning to end. Overall, I think that since it is really technical, we also need to play maybe a little bit more lyrically. When we do have a nice melody to play, a lot of the central themes from Scaramouche are in this, so when you do have the melody, I would definitely try to bring that out and make sure that it's singing and it really stands out compared to the other technical moments that are found throughout. Getting started, Polatschek wastes no time introducing one of the main motives from movement 1 in the original works. Now for this first phrase, I would suggest using the S-sharp 5 fourth fingering for measures 1, 2, 4, and 5 in order to eliminate the need to flip between the written F5s. Now looking ahead, I would also suggest the same fingering starting at measure 15 when the key modulates to D flat major. Take some time to score steady, marking all of the fingerings that you'll need to use throughout. This is a really fantastic way to make use of your time early on in the learning phase. Get familiar with the way your fingers are going to move in relationship to the clarinet. Make no mistakes with the clarinet while working through it. I like having a clear sense of what I'm going to do, a nice blueprint, and I think it's just a more efficient, easier way to get from beginning to end without feeling like you have a lot of roadblocks along the way. Now moving just ahead, we have another motive from the first movement that begins in measure 7. For this melody, I find it a little bit more tuneful to stretch the 16 notes and place a slight lift on the repeated 8th note figures that lead into the stepwise motion that's building into the first descending sequence at measure 10. In general, I really strive to make the most of the melody when I'm able to play it, so no matter what piece or style I'm working in, if it's a technical study such as this one, I really try to make the most of these opportunities. That way we can balance the brilliance from the technique, the lyricism of the musical line that is coming through between it. Now in the first chromatic sequence, we have a series of major triads that have been inverted so the dominant is receiving the most emphasis. Now when practicing this section, try working on each beat and strive for connectivity between each interval. Don't go for individual notes, really try to make sure the intervals are clean, then piece it together to make sure that the entire phrase feels cohesive. In general, I would say that the tendency is maybe you want to rush, so really make sure that you have a definitive plan for how you're going to perform this, pace it, and make sure that you're able to play in a way that provides you with enough air to get to measure 14 when you take your next breath. Now for fingerings in the first sequence, we have a couple options for measure 10. If you feel more comfortable, you can definitely make use of the alternate D-sharp 6 on beat 2 if you find the primary fingering a bit more challenging. For beat 3, I would suggest using the overblown open D6 fingering, and then on beat 4, using the overblown C-sharp 5 fingering as well. If you are using these options, I suggest taking a moment to tune these notes, as they will maybe a little bit wonky, a little bit foreign. If you do not play them very often, they do require a bit of adjustment in the voicing. Sometimes the air needs to be adjusted to really play through and make sure you're rounding out the tone, the sound. They can be a little bit hollow, so take some time to familiarize yourself with these notes, but on the upside, once you do find yourself familiar with them, they're a really good option for getting through passages like this, which meander through that break over and over again. I personally use the regular fingerings, but the alternate fingerings are just as easy to use if you have a way to learn them in a way that's efficient and productive. Now for practicing these groupings and many other moments in the study, patience is key. I want to say that like most other pieces, just playing it from beginning to end and hoping that's going to work out is not going to be the way to be successful and feel confident on stage. Really try to explore different ways that you can break up the line so that each try is just as brilliant as the last. Use dotted rhythms, triplets, whatever works for you, use it. But a helpful way that I like to practice is what I call bridging the gap. For this particular practice method, we're going to want to ensure that we are building consistency and allowing ourselves to move between tricky transitions without sacrificing both rhythm and expression. So to give you a quick example, at measure 10, I'm going to start by setting my metronome at 60, and then I'm going to start at measure 10, playing the first beat only, placing any amount of rest in between, let's say a whole rest, so 4 beats, and then I'm going to play the next entrance in beat 2. Now over time, I'm going to take away the amount of time that I'm putting in the middle for empty space for rest, and then by that point, I should be able to play from point A to point B, from beat 1 to beat 2, without feeling like I'm unsure of where my fingers are going, and I should be able to get between both sections with a good and better understanding of how to perform it in context. So I just want to say that during the course of my education, I always found this particular way of practicing to be really efficient, especially when my folder was filled with stuff that I had to learn really quickly. We don't always have the most amount of time to practice everything in our folder with hours a day. But if you can just work on the most difficult sections, I think that's going to be the biggest payoff and the biggest way to get the most out of your practice time. Now moving on, in measure 18, I would suggest using the alternate E-flat 6 fingering for the 16th note triplets. Now for the instances in this phrase where this note occurs, all we need to do is lift our index finger, and then we will avoid having to use the sliver key and E-flat, A-flat key. This is a note that we wouldn't want to use as a sustained option. It's just a really good option for going between the D flat and the E flat really quickly. It's more of a trill fingering, honestly, and it really does work in this instance because we don't have to use the sliver key, we don't have to use the E flat, A flat key. We could also use this other option. It's going to be 2-3, 2-3 plus the E flat, A flat key for the E flat. But in this instance, I just find this motion to be really impossible at the tempo we're trying to go at. So this is a really good option if you don't know it already. And in addition to that, I would also say that with these triplets, try to stretch them out. It's going to be really easy to compress these little moments in between. What we really want to do is just add a little bit of brilliance and a little bit more variety to the line. So try to really feel like you're singing through them. The more technical you play, the more lyrically you play. In measure 20, we have a downward sequence of alternating major and minor triads. Although there was only a single 8th rest rate, we might want to try taking just a tad bit more time to reset for the phrase that follows, really making sure that your pulse is remaining steady and you're not going to rush. Now as before, take some time to understand the relationship between each grouping, ensuring that the intervals are clean, easy. You're bringing out the emphasis at the bottom, that way we can really feel the chromaticism that's building until we get to measure 24. Nearing end of this lick, really try to place an audible crescendo. That way we really feel like the reoccurrence of the main motive is convincing and it sounds like we have really arrived somewhere. Measures 25 through 32, we have made a return to D flat major. The technical demands are now a bit higher. For my students, I like to reinforce the idea that the greater number of flats and sharps in the key signature, the more precise we have to be with every single movement we make. For example, in this measure, we have a lot of movement that needs to occur in the left hand alone. So taking this into consideration, we want to try isolating every moment that's giving us trouble and understand our tendencies as a player. That way we can better understand the way in which we're going to need to interact with the clarinet. I think the biggest thing we can do at any given time when we're learning something is keeping in check our technique. What are we actually doing to make the sound? Using a mirror, taping yourself on your phone, being able to self-critique and assess the ways in which things are not working out is the best way to learn in between lessons and those points in which you are receiving critique from somebody else. Then it makes you a better player and allows you to become a better teacher for someone down the road who may be having a similar issue. In measure 33, we have a final chromatic sequence that now uses ascending minor triads. Now in the context of this etude, this line prepares us for the final passage that will end the piece. Practicing these groupings, I find it a little bit easier to ascend rather than descend. So make sure that regardless of whatever tempo you ultimately decide on for performance, you will need to be able to play the forthcoming septuplets at the same tempo with just as much clarity and musicality. It can be really easy to rush through these sequences and these ascending groupings, so take some time to learn them well and take some time to learn them in a way that makes it easy and enjoyable. So moving just ahead at those septuplets, I will say that it can be really easy to rush these as well. Try to feel like you're stretching through them. Play every single note clearly, just as a pianist with the keyboard. In my own performance, I also place a bit of a tenuto on each eighth note so that I could really feel like I was playing to every downbeat and really feeling like the direction was maintained and I had a sense of arrival at the very end. Closing out the study, 5 measures before the end, B3, we have an instance where we'll need to slide between the G sharp and F sharp pinky keys. Now, as explained in Etude 1, sliding typically occurs when we do not have the option to alternate to the left for a written E flat or A flat. On B3, we're going to want to slide from the right G sharp to the right F sharp. That way we're able to play the E on the left and the G sharp on the right later on in the measure. Now, if we were to try and play this beat going from the G sharp on the right to the F sharp on the left to E on the right, we would then be unable to play the last G sharp since there is no alternate G sharp key. If you do happen to have this alternate pinky key, go ahead and use it so that both pinkies can alternate as usual. For the purpose of this video, I decided to include this tutorial again just so you have the option, since many clarinets don't have this key. I play on a smaller privileged clarinet. This key is included, many of the buffets have it. I believe some of the younger clarinets do as well. You're not going to find this key on beginning and intermediate horns, so sliding is definitely the only option that you'll have to use for this moment in this etude. And with that, we've reached the end of etude number 8 in Victor Polatschek's advanced studies for the clarinet. Having reached the end of this etude and masterclass, I hope that you've gained a little bit more knowledge and it helps you prepare this music for a brilliant performance in the future. In case you have any additional questions on this etude, please feel free to reach out. Leave me a comment below and I'll get back to you very soon with some feedback. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time for etude number 9. Happy practicing, and don't forget to click subscribe on the way out. See ya.